Am I audible? Welcome everyone. A very good morning. And today we are in this series of webinars organizing another very interesting webinar here at Parul Institute of Law, Parul University. The webinar is based on the subject matter of arbitration law, scope of arbitration law in corporate law firms. And for the same, we have got a very interesting resource person here with us, Mr. Sushil Jetmalani. He is an associate at Shardul Amarchand Mangal Das and Company, one of the leading law firms of India. So I welcome you, Sushil, for this particular webinar.
Thank you, Faiz.
So before handing it over to our resource person, I would request our Dean, Dr. Akhil Syed sir, to give a brief welcome note for this webinar.
Thank you, Mr. Faiz. Thank you for organizing such a wonderful webinar, and that too with such a young and energetic resource person, Sushil. So on my personal behalf, on behalf of Faculty of Law and Parul Institute of Law, I welcome you, and I'm very happy to see you. Because when I go through your profile, I thought there would be some big shot and would be thinking about arbitration. But when I see, I'm really happy that a student and I see you're like a student. Young boy like you have reached such an excellence. Really, I congratulate you for your all this achievement, and I congratulate your parents also who have such a wonderful son. Really, very good.
Thank you, sir.
Arbitration is something, when I was practicing, people, most of the lawyers were feeling, why to let the client for an arbitration? If the matter will be arbitrated, then how would we earn bread and butter? Probably around 10 years before, a decade ago, this was a perception among the, of course, lower lawyers practicing at a lower level. So that is what was perception, and now I see that they have also understood the importance. Of course, there are several national policies and several efforts from the High Court and Supreme Court also. So now everyone is interested and need to know that what actually is the arbitration and how it is not going to take our bread and butter. So it's very good. We will be listening from a young chap. So new innovative ideas and new dimensions which people like us at a middle age would not have even thought about. Sushil, I will just introduce you our institute. Our institute was established in 2015 as a constituent college of Parul University, which was established as a private university by Second Amendment Act into Gujarat Private University Act 2015. Thereafter, the institute has grown vertically as well as horizontally. We started with 3 programs, 5-year integrated programs, ALL, then we started LLB 3 years program. We do have LLM with 6 different specializations. We do offer MPhil and PhD, and we do have a very good number of research scholars in this program. So, and this is what is our tradition, to invite very senior and experienced grey-haired judges from retired from the High Court and Supreme Court, and at the same time to invite young chap like you to have a different dimension of the same content. I once again welcome you on this Parul Institute of Law and request Mr. Faiz to carry forward further. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Faiz.
Okay. Thank you so much, sir. So before actually beginning our discussion, I will just like to give a brief disclaimer to everyone, which is that this entire webinar is only for academic purposes, and therefore whatever has been will be discussed in the course of this webinar by the resource person shall not be construed as a legal opinion. So All right, so Sushil, starting off now. So, a very fundamental question with respect to arbitration is that what's your take on arbitration in comparison to other modes of ADR, maybe conciliation, mediation, negotiation? What's your take?
Thank you, Fez. So first of all, I would like to thank Dr. Akil Sayed for his kind words. And sir, it is indeed a pleasure to be in acquaintance of such an accomplished person like you. To answer your question, Fez, when we talk about mediation, conciliation, or negotiations and arbitration, one thing we all know is that all these are forms of alternate dispute resolution. That is to say that these mechanisms always operate out of court. So, except negotiations, otherwise all all these forms of alternate dispute resolutions involve a third party which is neutral, and when a dispute arises between the parties to the contract, then parties have an option to choose either of them. They can choose to sit across a table and put forth their case and negotiate, and through dialogue, which we know as negotiations, it may or may not involve a third party. And when we talk about conciliation, conciliation is a process where a neutral third party known as the conciliator is involved and assists the parties. The parties are required to put their case before the conciliator, and the conciliator will then hear the parties and draw up a proposal, which the parties may or may not follow. Now, mediation, when we talk about mediation, it is not very different from conciliation, except in the fact that parties themselves arrive at a settlement, and the mediator, which is the third party involved in the process, only assists them in coming to that coming to that settlement. Now, these acceptable resolutions that the parties arrive at are on their own, and they are the only role of mediator is to provide advice and facilitate communication. There is no adjudicatory role as such. Now, when we compare that with arbitration, it is very different. Arbitration, one needs to first understand that arbitration is a creature of a contract. So the parties, before entering in the contract, have to agree that, if at all a dispute arises between them in the course of the performance of the contract, then the same would be referred to arbitration and resolved through arbitration. And this understanding has to be reduced in writing. That is the mandate of Section 7 of the Arbitration Act. So one of the key distinctive features of arbitration is its binding nature. Like, as I discussed earlier, conciliation, mediation, and negotiation, the result of it or the acceptable resolution that comes out of it may not be binding in nature. Parties are free to not follow it. So in arbitration, that is not the case. It is binding in nature. Whatever the award is passed by the arbitrator is binding, and the arbitrator is vested with the powers of the court. That is to say, his role is adjudicatory in nature. He will hear the parties. He will preside over witness depositions, summon witnesses, etc. And then finally, after hearing the parties, would deliver an award, which will be enforced as a decree of the court unless it is challenged under Section 34 of the Arbitration Act. So these are the key distinctive features from arbitration.
Okay, all right. So when we talk about law in general, it in itself is quite dynamic, and arbitration law or ADR for that matter is no different. There are amendments every now and then. So what's your take on this latest 2019 amendments pertaining to arbitration?
Well, 2019 amendment contains certain very important features that helps in streamlining the arbitration process. Now, earlier what used to happen was that arbitrations used to go on for, there was no time limit. They used to go on for a longer period of time, which used to defeat the purpose of the act, which is speedy redressal of contractual disputes. So by 2015 Amendment Act, a provision was added, Section 29A, which fixed timelines for the arbitrators to render an award within a period of 1 year from the date on which he accepts reference to the dispute. Now, this amendment was, what happened was, after this amendment came, there were certain problems that were fixed. We observe and we've experienced also that a lot of time is wasted wasted might be the wrong word, but a lot of time is taken in completion of pleadings. The claimant would file his statement of claim, the respondent would file his statement of defense, and then there would be rejoinder, reply to counterclaim. So a lot of time used to go in that process. And also, our arbitrators also need 2-3 months to write the award because arbitrations are usually document intensive. So to do away with this problem, 2019 amendment brought in an amendment to this section 29A, whereas this 1 year period was to be calculated from the date of completion of pleadings. Now, the legislature is mindful of the fact that completion of pleadings cannot go on forever. So a time period for completion of pleadings have also been fixed. It is 6 months as per the new section 23. So that is a welcome step which has been brought by 2019 amendment. And another important feature of 2019 amendment is the amendment brought in the appointment procedure of arbitrators. So what normally happens is that when parties are, when a dispute arises between the parties, normally they would not agree on anything. So deciding who will be the arbitrator becomes a problem. So what happens? You approach High Court in the case of domestic arbitrations, or you approach Supreme Court in the cases of international arbitration. That is under Section 11. So now, once that happens, High Court or the Supreme Court, as the case may be, would then appoint an arbitrator. Now, what happens is there is this process of going to the courts adds to the delays and defeats the very purpose of the Arbitration Act, because we've seen that Section 11 applications go on for a longer period of time. So with 2019 amendment, what has happened is High Courts and Supreme Courts are empowered to delegate this appointment procedure to an institution that may be designated by them. And therefore, one thing is happening is that the court interference in arbitration is reduced to a greater extent. So now the arbitrations can commence quickly and it can go on, finish quickly, as we know. I just mentioned about the timelines in 29A. And apart from that, another noteworthy amendment is the Constitution of Arbitration Council of India. Very positive step in my opinion. The council is constituted to encourage ADR in India and work towards making India a hub for international arbitrations and be a force to reckon with in the international arbitration arena. With this, they also have the duty to grade the arbitrators based on their caliber and talent. Now, one aspect that I would want to also discuss is that there is nothing. It's not everything that was brought by the amendment was good. What used to happen was that when the parties refer their disputes to arbitration and the award is rendered, now award is to be executed and enforced as a decree. Now, what used to happen before 2015 was that when the arbitration awards were challenged, there was the Section 36 execution under Section 36 was stayed. Now, because there is a challenge which is pending, so this thing was dubbed as automatic stay. This process of automatic stay was done away with by 2015 Amendment Act, whereby an amendment is brought to Section 36, which stated that there won't be any impediment to enforcement of an award if a challenge is pending and the person aggrieved by the award has to file a separate application for stay. So once that happens, it is the automatic stay process comes to an end. But there was one problem with that. In 2015 Amendment Act, which came on 23rd October 2015, the problem was courts were faced with the difficulty that whether this amendment would be applicable prospectively to the arbitrations that are commencing after that date, cutoff date, or whether it will be applicable to all the pending arbitrations. So there was a judgment by the Honorable Supreme Court in BCCI versus Kochi Cricket, whereby this problem was solved, and Supreme Court held that this amendment of 2015 is procedural in nature, and hence it would apply retrospectively to all pending arbitrations. So what happens to when the 2019 Amendment Act comes? When the 2019 Amendment Act came, there was a section 87 that was brought in, which says that all the amendments brought in by 2015 would be applicable post 23rd October 2015. A very regressive move on the part of the legislature, in my opinion. And the Honorable Supreme Court recently, in the case of HCC versus Union of India, if I'm not wrong, struck down this amendment and made the amendment more promising and it is now welcome, and all the negative and regressive steps have been done away with. So in all, to sum it up, 2019 amendment is a positive step and helps streamlining the arbitral process.
Okay. So my next question would be that, how much is the importance of the selection of the arbitrators? And as an extension to that question, we now have this provision for accreditation of the various arbitrators, right, according to the 2019 amendments. So what's your take on that? Is it really beneficial? Is it something which is maybe little overrated?
Thank you, Faiz. So to answer your first question, it is very important. It is said that an arbitrator is as good as the arbitration. So one cannot emphasize enough about how important it is to make the right selection of arbitrators. So this is because arbitration is considered to be a remedy without recourse. That is to say, there is very little scope of challenge once the award is delivered. Under Section 34, the challenge to an arbitral award, you see the grounds are very limited. And therefore, once you have selected the arbitration, there's no going back. Now, in my opinion, the most important consideration for selection of arbitration, the arbitrator, would be the domain knowledge pertaining to the subject matter of the dispute. Say, disputes can be of varied nature. It could be a telecom dispute, it could be a construction dispute, it could be a power company's dispute. So these are very technical areas where the specified field of that particular area is very important for adjudication of disputes. And apart from domain knowledge, I would think, if I think of it, availability is another very important consideration when you're selecting arbitrators. Allow me to explain that. So when parties have decided to refer their disputes to arbitration, what happens is normally you file a Section 11, get the arbitrator appointed by courts. That is normally the case in India. What happens is normally retired High Court judges or Supreme Court judges would be appointed as arbitrators. Now, these eminent personalities have so many arbitrations and they are so busy that if my arbitration is before a retired High Court judge and today I have got the date for my final arguments, and if I don't finish within the stipulated time period, which normally happens, which very commonly happens, so then the next date I would get is after 3 months, 4 months, because their diaries are full. That is the problem we generally face. So a lot of time is wasted in giving a recap of the arguments already advanced. Similarly, when the respondents will argue their case, they will face the similar issue, and the arbitration is stretched for a much longer period. And obviously, we've seen that arbitration for the longest time has been treated as a weekend exercise because lawyers have to juggle between courts and arbitration. So that problem is also there. So therefore, availability of the arbitrators is a very key consideration when you're selecting the arbitrators. Other than that, nationality of arbitrators is also very important criteria, especially in the cases of international arbitration. Say, for example, if one party to a contract is Indian and the other is Australian, they would agree that the arbitrator would be from Singapore, so that a neutral third party is, adjudicating the dispute, if any. So that is there. And today, in today's times, recently what we've seen is that another key consideration is how well versed the arbitrator is in handling the technologically advanced softwares like Zoom and other, we have WebEx and Google Meet for that matter. Because in these times of COVID and where we are observing social distancing, all the hearings are happening through video conferencing. So yes, selection of arbitrators is very important. Now, another question that you put to me was about accreditation of arbitrators. So in my opinion, any sort of accreditation or grading inculcates a feeling of competitiveness, which in turn results in better decision making because everyone would strive to become better. And simply the more better an arbitrator is, more arbitrations he will do. And obviously more parties would prefer going to them. So all the judges, or not just the judges, the technical people, we have CAs, we have engineers, we have lawyers who are interested in arbitration practice, would have to pull up their socks and deliver the award in time, have the necessary experience, the quality of the what needs to be impeccable. So all that will obviously improve decision making, and also it will improve the ADR ecosystem in our country.
Okay, all right. My next question is kind of pertaining to the parties. So, like, as per your understanding, what are the pros and cons of arbitration through firms vis-a-vis chambers of advocates? So, what's your take on that?
To me, there is no cons or negatives from having arbitrations done through firms. I mean, we've seen chambers and independent practitioners these days who run their offices in a so-called firm structure. Having said that, there is in today's world we have chambers who are very much competent, and we have firms who also function like chambers, and there are chambers who function like firms. So, but to address to your question, from the client's perspective, especially, I feel that firms are more suitable simply because there are more number of lawyers, more resources, and infrastructure is usually very robust in firms, and therefore I feel that firms would be a better option, especially in high-stake arbitrations. And another advantage that firms have is, especially full-service law firms, which have variety of practice areas ranging from banking and finance, project finance, real estate, intellectual property rights. So all these specialized teams, when a dispute pertaining to any of these fields, for example, say real estate or say banking and finance, comes before the arbitration teams, then their expertise comes in very handy, and helps us in forming commercially efficacious arguments. So that one thing I think would be missing in chambers, because chambers are generally one dispute resolution practice and there are no other practice areas. Usually that is the case. So in that sense, firms are more suitable. And from the perspective of lawyers, especially budding lawyers, firms I feel are better because there is a strict review mechanism of the work that you do. So that helps in professional growth and improving the quality of your work. Especially in firms, we have senior colleagues who would review your work, and the work product that I give would be refined and undergo a serious review process. So that would help in professional growth and improving the quality, in my opinion.
Okay, great. So since you mentioned about budding lawyers, we'll now shift our focus from the parties and arbitration as a process to the students, to our law students, and even for laymen, let's say. So, what is basically the work profile of an associate in a law?
In arbitrations, basically, as I mentioned earlier, they are highly document intensive. And personally, even I'm working on an arbitration where documents run into 10,000 pages. So, an associate is expected to undertake a rigorous document reviewing and brief your senior colleagues as to the facts of the matter. So that is one of the key roles that is played by the associates. Then associates are also expected to undertake in-depth research of all the law points that are involved in a particular matter or the matter which is assigned to that particular associate. And then associates generally also prepare the first drafts of the pleadings that are filed before the arbitral tribunal or even for that matter courts. So they will prepare the first drafts, and of course that will undergo refinement and review process. So that is there, and then the associates are also expected to take notes, be vigilant during conferences and during hearings. They are supposed to maintain the record of whatever is being discussed and argued for that, and even argued for that matter. Then at times what we've seen is, since the associates have taken document reviewing and have done their research, so they are also involved in formulating case strategies. So when you see that the role of an associate could be as basic as from taking notes in a hearing to for assisting in formulating case strategies. This is one of the key roles of any lawyer with relating to arbitration or any matter for that purpose. So, and as you grow in seniority, what happens is you're given more responsibility in terms of business developmental roles, briefing clients, handling clients, and then briefing senior advocates or partners, arguing counsel, etc. So that is generally the role of an associate. It is very difficult to put it in a straitjacket formula that this is what you are required to do. We've done as an associate, we've done all sorts of work. We've done clerical work, we've done intellectual work, everything. So that is the role of an associate.
All right, so it's very dynamic in brief. All right.
Certainly.
Okay, so again, my next question is again pertaining to the students. So, what strategies should a law student adopt to make a career, let's say, in the field of arbitration in general? And if you could give certain particular insights with respect to law firms, like what internships should a law student look forward to? Let's say someone is in their third or fourth year right now, looking forward, who is like primarily interested in arbitration, looking forward to make a career in that. So what sort of internship strategies or reading materials, let's say, what would be your giveaway for them?
Friends, what happens is when you are in law school, what is your prime objective? Is to get a better, if you want to get into law firm, then you would want to get placed in a law firm. So what would a law firm see first? The first thing that as a law firm HR person who would see is your CV. Now, as a law student, you're supposed to build your CV because that is the first impression that is going to be there in the person who's going to interview that law student. So I would say that if the person's, if that law student's choice is arbitration, choice of career is arbitration, then writing papers, articles on arbitration related topics is a must. And this I speak from personal experience. As a law student, I wasn't aware of this, and I did not write a lot of articles. But when you go to when I've seen other people who have written a lot of articles and have published papers, they obviously have an advantage, and it makes more sense practically also. Once you have a CV in hand, you will see that okay, this person has written particular articles. The obvious thing that will come in the mind of an interviewer would be to quiz that law student on basis the research and the basis the article that they have done. When that person has not written many articles, what will happen? Question can come from anywhere, and that would be difficult to answer. So there are more chances of the interview not being satisfactory if you've not written more articles and research papers. So that is very important for law students. And I personally encourage all law students to take part in moots. If your choice of arbitration is choice of career is arbitration, then definitely go for arbitration moots, and that will help to gain perspective of how arbitrations work and how formal or informal the setting is vis-a-vis other ADRs and vis-a-vis courts. So that is one more aspect that I would want to focus on, that please participate in moot courts. Then the most important is internships. I mean, I have, when I was a law student, I underwent 13 to 14 internships in my 5-year law course. So that, unfortunately, in most of them there were ongoing arbitration cases. So I got the opportunity to, observe the proceedings closely and get an insight in the nuances of the arbitration field. So internships is very important. Now I understand that the biggest difficulty the law student would face is getting the right internships. So for that, there is two things that needs to be done. You need to apply early and you need to keep following up. Because if you are, generally what happens is the HR of law firms, or even if the associates are dealing with the internship process at a particular law firm, they are busy people and they are flooded with internship applications. So if you apply early, you have a better chance of securing one. And constant following up is necessary, because since usually the associates or the HR people are very busy, they would tend to forget about the application. So you need to constantly follow it up on a weekly basis, or once in twice a week, or once in 2 weeks, depending on the time period of the internship slot that that law student wants. So that is very important. And apart from that, I would suggest that if arbitration is the choice of career, then you need to read up a lot of judgments that come on the topics related to arbitration. It is a very developing and dynamic field of law. So reading up judgments and various arbitration blogs is very important to keep yourself updated with the latest developments. My personal favorite is Kluwer Arbitration Blog. In my free time, I just surf through it, and there are various topics related to international arbitration as well as domestic arbitration. So that helps me a lot. Other than that, all the important judgments are usually reported on Bar and Bench and Live Law and all such legal journalistic platforms. So that helps a lot. You need to read up a lot. That is there. So that would be my advice to the law students.
All right. So, Sushil, we have got a few questions lined up. Students have sent me certain questions during the course of our webinar. So, I'll just put it up for you. This is in context to what you told about publishing articles. Okay, if you are interested in arbitration. So it's a question that how to find topics. So basically anything out of the blue, or like how to actually focus on something which would be substantial. Maybe that's what the essence of the question is.
So Faiz, what happens is when you're writing an article, you would want it to get published, right? That is the objective. So if a person wants to write on a particular topic, it may be, I have no problems if it is a topic of interest to a particular law student. But generally what happens is that if a lot of articles have been published on that particular topic, then it is unlikely that that particular article will get published. So what happens is that you need to find out the latest developments, write on them, and therefore, there you will have better chances of getting them published. And also, when you're updated with the latest developments, those are the types of questions that would be put to a law student during interviews. So, on recent topics, you should write more articles, because there is a larger scope of research and a larger canvas is available to present your own views.
Okay. Right. So there's another question. Mediator as a career, that's what it pertains to. So is it is there any fundamental change in the role or vis-a-vis an arbitrator? Plus, is it more formal, informal? What's your take on that?
See, as mediation is one of the most advanced forms of ADR, and it is still developing in our country. Now, courts have also started referring disputes to mediation. Section 89 of CPC empowers the courts to do so. The role of mediator is very important because it requires very specialized skills of negotiations, of communications. So it is a very niche area of expertise. So that ways, mediator as a career is very, very lucrative because we don't have good mediators. We don't have a lot of opportunities where the disputes are referred to mediation. It is obviously developing. So it is one of the developing fields where one can really excel. Now, as far as arbitrators are concerned, it is very different. Arbitrators have an adjudicatory function to, undertake. So that ways, the person needs to have specified knowledge of that subject matter as well as some of the adjudicatory role and some knowledge of legal principles. Now, normally what happens is CPC and Evidence Act does not apply to arbitrations, but we have a judgment of Supreme Court in Adhunik Steel's case, where the principles underlying these procedural laws would be used as guidelines to undertake arbitration. So therefore, arbitrators needs to be more abreast with all these aspects. And now, after the 2019 amendment, there are criterias for arbitrators. Now, for arbitrators, as far as my reading of the amendment is there, be it a CA, be it a legal person, be it an engineer, 10 years of experience is required, or the person needs to be on a senior managerial post, or must have had experience in working with government agencies. So a high threshold of experience has brought in by the amendment, and hence one needs to have that experience to become an arbitrator. And obviously, some legal knowledge is always helpful.
All right. So our next question is pertaining to internships with institutes. So as there are primarily two types of arbitrations, ad hoc and institutional ones. So do these institutions which carry out institutional arbitration, is there any scope of internships there? If yes, then what is the benefits of it according to you? So maybe you can take it as it in comparison, like let's say internship at some chambers or internship at a law firm pertaining to arbitration vis-a-vis some institution. So if you could explain a little.
Internship with institutions obviously helps you, have a very good observation of how institutional arbitration works, which is very different from ad hoc arbitrations. There are a set of rules, and the administrative assistance that is provided by an institution often leads to arbitrations being more time effective, more cost effective in the long run, and that is the future. We have with the new 2019 Amendment Act, there was another act that was enacted, that was New Delhi International Arbitration Center Act, which was established, and a lot of impetus is being given to institutional arbitrations. So interning there, I've heard internship experiences in international institutions such as SIAC or LCIA. So there, the internships have been really fruitful, especially if the choice of career is arbitration, and it gives you a wholesome idea of how institutions work and how international arbitrations work. So that is also, I feel internships with institutions would be fruitful. As far as internships with Indian institutions is concerned, I'm afraid I'm not aware of how the experiences have been, but I'm sure with the impetus that the legislature and the government is giving to institutional arbitration and the positive steps that are being taken to make India an arbitration hub internationally, I believe that the experience will be really nice and would be fruitful.
All right, great. Another question from a young student, so it's little fundamental in nature. So whether the arbitrator, who will be the arbitrator, that is fixed in the contract itself, or once the dispute arises, it is fixed after that.
That depends on the parties. See, in arbitrations, one of the key features of all the alternative dispute resolution mechanisms, including arbitrations, is party autonomy. They can choose to name a particular arbitrator. They can choose to name a panel of arbitrators from which they can choose. Or in cases, we have seen that there are 3-member arbitral tribunals where one party chooses one, the other party chooses the another, and both those arbitrators will choose the presiding arbitrator. So it depends on the type of arbitration agreement that has been executed between the parties. If in most cases, if the arbitration clause is not drafted properly and no name is specified, then parties can subsequently also agree upon a particular person being an arbitrator. And if they don't agree, then always an option to go to courts under Section 11 is open, and then the arbitrator would be appointed to them.
Okay. Who pays for the arbitrator?
The parties do. The cost of arbitration, one of the demerits of arbitrations which people usually discuss is the cost of arbitration. Arbitrations are expensive pursuits, they say. But in my opinion, it is time effective. Normally, a dispute in courts would take 5 to 6 years, and this I'm speaking conservatively. But in arbitrations, it would be resolved in a year or two. So in that sense, arbitrations are not very expensive, but yes, the arbitrator's fee is decided upfront. After the amendments, now there is a Schedule 4 in the Act, which determines the probable fees of the arbitrators in comparison to the claim value and the counterclaim value. So that is also that parties may choose to go by the schedule, or as I said, party autonomy is central to the theme of arbitration. They can choose to decide what the fees of the arbitrators would be during the arbitration hearing. And the cost is to be borne 50-50 by the respondents and the claimants. And the party which is successful will be reimbursed, of course, in terms of all the legal costs that they may have incurred. So the cost of the arbitrators would be split between the parties.
Okay. So I guess this is pretty much it for the question answers. The rest of the questions which I am seeing, they are pretty much repetitive in nature. So finally, so Sushil, what as a young professional, as Dean sir said, what would be your parting advice to the law students, since it's not been that long that you were a student? So you know the dynamics in and out of the scenario right now. So what would be your parting advice to law students in general? It's not necessarily, related to arbitration, but you may give any particular advice as well.
Well, Dean sir spoke about bread and butter. So yes, entering into a profession is a different experience altogether. I mean, one as a law student, one cannot imagine what it would be like. So my parting advice to law students would be to work hard. I mean, they say that law is a jealous mistress, and it asks for sacrifices. So make them work really hard, write articles, do internships, and you'd be better off. And one more advice that I would like to give is, once you enter the profession right after law school, then whenever you're working on a case, just maintain the reasonable bounds of law. In the sense, you're preparing your arguments. Don't prepare arguments which are very outlandish or which requires very in-depth, nuances and appreciating all the details. Because what happens is, when the more complicated an argument is, it will be more difficult for you to sell that argument to a judge or an arbitrator. So keep it simple and be within the reasonable bounds of law, and you should be fine. That would be my parting advice.
Okay. Great. So, Sushil, thank you so much for, first of all, accepting our invitation. for being the resource person for this webinar, giving your valuable inputs on the professional side and even on the procedural aspects. So I believe this webinar, it covered a whole lot of topics. So it was a broad webinar, and which was covered in a short period of time by you. And I definitely believe that your inputs would not only be useful for law students, but also any other layman as such, okay, with respect to ADR in general being an alternate to the litigation. So thank you so much, Sushil, for giving your valuable inputs, for taking out the time from your busy schedule and enlightening our students as well as all our viewers. So thank you so much from
Thank you,
the
Faiz.
entire.
Pleasure is all mine. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. I thoroughly enjoyed interacting with you and answering interesting questions that were put to me by the attendees. So thank you, and it was nice being here. And thank you, Dean sir, for those kind words. And obviously, we tend to give back to the students and our legal profession in whatever ways we can. So thank you for giving me this opportunity. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thanks a lot.